Hurley Bradford stood inside some bar called the Orange Anchor late at night. Somebody had broken through the front window and absolutely wrecked the place. If Hurley was smart, he would have left before the cops showed up, but he didn't hear any sirens, and he was feeling more angry and desperate than smart that day. So he finally took the pack of smokes he had been looking for all day from behind the bar and left a couple of bucks for them. He was trying to be honest. But they were his last $2, all he had left, just for a pack of cigs. He had no idea what he would do tomorrow, nowhere to go, nowhere to sleep tonight. Then Hurley thought about what had happened to him that day, and something just snapped in him. That day had been one of the worst of Hurley's life, you see. He had just arrived in Louisville, trying to get back on track. He had spent the whole day running around town, trying to find a job or a place to stay, or even just a little change or some food to get by. He had always thought coming to the city would mean he'd have a chance, a shot that he never got elsewhere. When Hurley asked for a job, they said no before they even knew he had a record. At the gas station, the owner beat him up when he went to go ask for smokes. Hurley tore up his only real shirt to bandage the cuts. And now he wore a disgusting hunting vest that he had found poking through the trash. That had been his day. Walking around and being told no at a glance, and then being told that you're scum because you're hungry and nobody will hire you. Well, now Hurley was truly hungry. Truly out of money. So he ground his teeth and he took a drink. He grabbed a bottle of booze and downed it completely. A year of sobriety went straight down the drain. He didn't have any money to leave behind anymore, and even if he did, he wouldn't have. He was sure the people who owned this place were just like the people who had spat on him all day, all year, his whole life. If they were so disgusted by him, then he would live up to that. Hurley broke a bottle and scattered the shards of it around. He drank even more. He lost all control, all sense of what he'd been trying to do for the last year. The control that he'd been trying to keep himself under just went out the window. The liquor completely undid all of that. It made him feel free for just a little bit. So, naturally, Hurley ended up making a Molotov cocktail, and with only a moment to consider where to throw it, smashed it in the center of the bar. Hurley stood still and watched the fire rage and grow, not as much as he thought it would, but still he just loved watching it burn. Then, suddenly, the firefighter showed up, and for a brief second, Hurley was sober. His fears all came rushing back. They might see him and report him to the cops, get him sent back to prison. Hurley could not go back to prison, so he ran back up the street, and as soon as he was out of sight, fell back into a drunken haze and fell asleep behind a building. Hurley woke up the next morning feeling hungover, sore, and still exhausted. Then he remembered what he had done. Fear gripped his stomach and made it turn over. The firefighters might have recognized him. He had to get as far away from this place as possible and hide. He would have changed clothes if he had had any to change into. He ran across town to look for somewhere, anywhere he could lay low. Luckily, it was a Saturday, and that meant that a lot of the offices would have nobody in them, or at least an empty room or two inside. So Hurley found one a few blocks away, and it even had a window so he could see any cops coming. He'd never mess up again after this, he promised himself. Nothing but the straight and narrow. He'd manage to find a job soon, he was sure, and well, until then, he would just have to eat whatever he could find. He'd found some old lard in a trash can. That would have to keep him going for a day, if he had to. Hurley didn't really want to eat dumpster lard. He also really didn't want to go back to prison, and if he kept doing things like he did last night, then he'd be back in prison all too soon. Hurley lied low in the office all day, slept while he could, and looked out for the fuzz. He left when it started to get dark. Hurley walked around the dark streets with the taste of that rancid dumpster lard sticking in the back of his throat, so he wandered, not really sure what he was looking for until he found an office building of some kind. That was when Hurley realized that something was going wrong in Louisville. There were two people down a hallway being worked on by some paramedics, and they were just straight up dead. One had some kind of bite mark or something around his throat, but that didn't really matter to Hurley. He grabbed whatever he could off of one of the dead guys while the paramedics' backs were turned. It wasn't stealing if the guy wasn't breathing anymore. With a few bucks and a new hat, Hurley found his way into a convenience store and bought himself a jersey. It'd be much easier to not get caught for his Molotov stunt at the bar with a whole new set of clothes. Hurley left some money that he got off of the dead guy, though. He was trying to be honest, after all. Hurley wandered for a while and found another office with a water dispenser and a carpeted floor to sleep on. He still felt really tired. Then after he slept a bit, he heard a helicopter overhead.
There is an outbreak of violent behavior in the area.
aggressive behavior? Something must be going wrong in this town, and now that he thought about it, Hurley hadn't really seen any cops lately, just some soldiers around. And soldiers, well, they wouldn't care about a little petty crime, would they? Apparently not, because somebody started just bashing the door of the office Hurley was hiding in, just some random person, and soon after they left, nobody showed up. No cops, no nothing, no security guard even. Still, Hurley felt something changing in the air. People were different, worried, on edge. And well, Hurley figured it might be time to get a little bit of protection. He found some food in a nearby office, and they probably wouldn't even notice it was gone, so no harm in taking a little. Hurley was walking past some stores when suddenly there was an explosion, and a whole crowd of people in there went up in flames. Though Hurley wasn't horrified, he wasn't disgusted at the thought of somebody that would do such a thing. Instead, he just watched the flames for a while and waited for somebody to show up. An ambulance, a fire truck, anything. But nobody did. There wasn't a single first responder on the scene, even when the flames started eating up the place. Things were deteriorating, becoming lawless. Hurley could see that now. Then he saw something he never expected. A crowd of people at an ATM, all these well-to-do, looking down their nose types who had full bank accounts and zero generosity for the likes of Hurley, all panicking as they couldn't access their money. The banking system was down. Hurley knew now that the rules were changing for sure. Everything was becoming different so quickly. Maybe he didn't have to be afraid of prison anymore after all. So he just straight up stole a crowbar from the hardware store. What did it matter? Even if somebody called the cops, they probably wouldn't even show up. And Hurley was proven right again when he saw an outright brawl in a nearby parking lot. Things were really getting crazy. Hurley didn't have to worry about protecting other people from himself, but he did realize that maybe it was time to start thinking about protecting himself from other people, so he'd need a gun. It was dark by the time Hurley made his way to the Army surplus store at the north end of town. He found his way to a back room where he took whatever seemed useful, a jacket and a satchel to carry things in. There weren't any weapons, though. And while frustratedly looking for someplace he could get his hands on a gun in there, Hurley heard a car alarm and some shots outside. Some guy with a rifle was just straight up shooting people in the street. Hurley kept his distance until the stranger with the rifle left, but then he saw another guy with a pistol, not paying attention to him. So Hurley took his chance. That pistol might be the difference between life and death for him, and he beat the stranger down with his crowbar and took the gun. The weight of the weapon was very reassuring, and Hurley found an unlocked car to rest in nearby. Hurley slept without any trouble. He never thought twice about the man he had just beaten to death. The car itself was a piece of junk though, so come morning Hurley wandered the streets with his pistol at the ready, looking for a car. With some wheels and a gun, well, the sky was the limit. It was about time too. Things were going really downhill around here, or uphill depending on how you looked at it. So Hurley found a car, smashed a window and hot-wired it. The skills from his old days on the run from the law were still as sharp as ever. Hurley got some gas, didn't bother paying for it, and had another drink. There was a gun store at the mall, he remembered, so he might as well check that out. In minutes, he'd crashed the car against a light pole, but that didn't matter to him. There were plenty of cars around, all free for the taking now, so he made it to the mall on foot. He smashed a window at the front and wow, was the place ever full of bodies. Something seriously crazy was going on inside, and by now, the gin Hurley had drank had worn off. And he decided maybe it was better to look elsewhere. As he was trying to hotwire a van though, some guys started trying to break into it. The next thing Hurley knew, a whole crowd of random people were chasing him in the parking lot. Hurley fought them off with his pistol, and he realized as he was that he should have felt afraid, he should have felt threatened, but he really didn't. He almost didn't believe it, but he felt excited, exhilarated to be fighting these strangers for his life. The gun really came in handy, and soon enough he'd scared them off. Another even tried to beat him down as he hotwired another car, but Hurley just laughed and didn't really care. As soon as he got the car running, that guy was toast. Just dirt underneath Hurley's wheels. It was dog eat dog now. There were others too, but Hurley ran them all over. For a split second, he wondered what he was doing, how crazy all of this was, but he knew that no cops were coming, and even if they were, this was self-defense, right? So it didn't matter that he mercilessly ran over so many people. It was his world now. They were just little speed bumps in it. And these guys were loaded up with loot too. Gold necklaces, rings, and all sorts of things. Hurley gleefully loaded them up in his car. A couple days ago, he had been eating trash to survive, and now he was filthy rich. It was a good time to skip town though, so Hurley drove off in his newest car, while running straight over anyone stupid enough to get in his way. With all this stuff, he could live the high life anywhere he wanted. Louisville was just a blip to him now, a detour on the amazing life he was about to start living, a free life. Finally, it was Hurley's time to shine, to do what he wanted to do. He drove until he was at a little strip mall just outside of town. There was a hunting supply store there. Hurley had seen it on a map. The place was closed though and locked up tight with bars. He'd passed a hardware store on the way in and figured it couldn't be too far, so he hiked up the street. Things were getting wild out here too. Some lady got her head blown off right next to Hurley, but he kept walking. It was all chaos everywhere, but he really didn't mind. The hardware store had some other weird person in it, making all kinds of crazy noises, drooling and bloody, so Hurley put them down with a shot to the head. The other two guys looting the store didn't really seem to mind. Hurley found what he needed and headed back up the street to the hunting store. A building was on fire and there were gunshots everywhere. There were more of these people acting like they were trying to eat him. Hurley didn't mind too much. He had enough bullets for now. As he used the sledgehammer he'd gotten from the hardware store to break down the bars into the gun store, Hurley figured that now he'd have enough bullets for good. Hurley had always loved guns, and he felt like a kid on Christmas. He grabbed whatever he wanted, feeling so excited. More bullets than he could dream of. Some pistols, a shotgun, a rifle. Jesus, they even had a bandolier for shells. So he filled his car up and locked and loaded. Nobody was going to bite him. Nobody was going to eat him. One of those people acting all weird and sick even bit a guy while Hurley watched, and geez, they were crazy. So Hurley started blasting. He had all the ammo he'd need to mow down 1,000 of these weird people. He might as well use it. After Hurley had had his fun, he drove back into town to get on the highway. Time to get out of this place in style and heavily armed. Some of the dead even had some more sweet gear on them, and Hurley knew they wouldn't mind. He took a little detour to take a nap in a nearby house. Its current occupants weren't a problem. He awoke to the sounds of jets in the air and had a little snack on the house. The roads were fairly quiet on the way out of town, but as Hurley got close to the edge of the city, there was a huge horde of those things. Those people biting and eating anyone they came across, more than he ever thought there could be. Seems Hurley was making the right call by getting out of Dodge. Hurley drove through some kind of military camp at the edge of town, but the gate covering the road and the huge crowd of biters made him turn back. It didn't matter though, he had a sledgehammer and no problems with using it, so he found a side road and bashed his way through the wire fence in the way. Nothing would stop him now, not ever again. He couldn't be caged. The biters didn't seem to care too much about the fence though, and there was another huge horde of them in some kind of military outpost down the road. Well, that's where things got a little dicey for Hurley. His car's engine died right in the middle of them, right at the worst time. Seems running over everything standing in the road had damaged the car pretty badly. So Hurley got out, ran down the road, and bashed his way through the fence before the biters could catch up with him. He'd have a tough time getting back to his car full of guns, but, well, there were probably more guns wherever he was going, so whatever, he wouldn't bother. He walked away from Louisville and into the forest. Anything he wanted was for the taking now. He even shot a few of the biters just for fun on the way out. As he made his way through the forest, the universe provided for him just as Hurley knew it would. Some military type who apparently didn't know when to quit in the woods. The soldier didn't think that Hurley was a threat, it seemed, so Hurley made sure that the military guy realized his mistake right before he died and got a sweet M16 for his trouble. Wow, were these weird, biting people relentless though, but Hurley didn't care. He gave any that tried to eat him a dose of lead and continued on his merry way. It was like nothing could touch him. Hurley walked for a while, not feeling the weight of his gear or the pain of his wound. Somewhere along the way, he wasn't sure when, one of those biters had actually managed to sink their teeth into him. It didn't matter much to Hurley though, he had plenty of supplies. He'd clean it out and it would heal soon enough. Gunshots and sirens went off in the distance as it grew dark and another jet flew overhead. Hurley didn't have a flashlight though, so he just felt his way through the darkness. He figured it was a good time to bed down for the night in a nearby farmhouse when suddenly the earth shook and explosions rocked the field next to him. And then another bomb impacted straight into the house that he was walking towards. Hurley looked at the pleasant flames burning from the bombs as he kept walking. There were craters and fire all over and, well, it seems like the military had quit playing around. Then he saw another house still lit in the distance, this time not on fire, and it seemed like a good place to take a rest. Hell, maybe he'd move in for a day if the bombs stopped dropping soon. Hurley gunned down the biters outside with glee. He really loved his new M16, way better than the guns he'd left behind in the car. Faster, deadly. He worked his way into the house, taking down sick and healthy occupants alike. He didn't want any other people bothering him. So Hurley found a nice little room and settled down for a nap. Then, a bomb woke him up. It had fallen pretty far away though, but shortly after, another fell right beside the house. More bombs were falling outside, and a biter was on fire and tried to get into the house and, well, Hurley just wasn't feeling as cozy in this place as he was before. It just didn't seem worth the trouble to him. The excitement of gunning down biters and narrowly avoiding being blown up kept him wide awake as he walked off into the night again. As it started to get light outside, he found exactly what he needed again. A car, just kinda sitting there with another idling behind it. No driver, and with the key in it too. It was like he'd been spending his whole life in prison, and the world was just opening up to him. Every day was an adventure, and not begging for money or begging for a job and eating trash. He could take whatever he wanted, do whatever he wanted, and it all just seemed to go his way. It was a good thing, too, that Hurley finally found this car, though. He was actually starting to feel a little bit tired, a little weak. Maybe he had a cold or something. Not too sick to enjoy blasting some biters to pieces while he got gas for his new ride, though. And the station still had plenty of food. So Hurley got back on the highway going south in his van, nothing but his wheels spinning and the open road of possibilities stretching out before him. No speed limits, no money troubles, no dumpster lard. Just a man living his best life on the road and come what may. Hurley had been waiting his whole life for this feeling, and just then he realized that this had been the best few days of his entire life. He felt like he was actually living for the first time ever. He'd been in danger, sure, but he hadn't felt any fear. He chose that danger, and he thrived in it. Hurley never thought that he could feel this way, and he never wanted to feel any other way again. He felt free and dangerous, and that meant everything to him. And he didn't care what it meant to anyone else. Soon Hurley reached West Point, the next town over, and found yet another military blockade, but this time there were actual soldiers guarding it, so Hurley decided to take a turn into the woods. There would probably be less biters out there, and finding some cabin or ranger station to take a nap in sounded pretty nice right now. Hurley had taken a bit of a snooze in the van, but he was actually starting to feel awfully tired, and kind of cold too, despite all of the clothes he was wearing. The van struggled a bit on the dirt paths, but Hurley did find a building, some kind of campground center or something. He used the biters nearby for target practice while a helicopter passed by overhead. As he was enjoying popping off some rounds into heads, he started to get this cough though. It felt like his chest had something growing in it. The place was full of stinking bodies on the inside, practically wall to wall, so Hurley started dragging them out of the back so he could get a little space where it wouldn't stink and he could rest for a bit. He could have the place clean in a day or two, no problem, he figured, though it really didn't help that the biters just kept coming. Jesus, they would not stop showing up. Maybe the helicopter was attracting them, but they would not leave Hurley alone while he tried to clean the place. Still, he was making progress, but all the gunshots attracted something even worse than biters that Hurley hadn't really thought of. Out of nowhere, these huge guys in gas masks carrying hammers just ran up and started beating on Hurley. He barely made it to the car and got another bite and some hits from the sledgehammer. His damn gun kept running out of bullets. Maybe he should have saved some instead of just blasting every single biter that he came across, but Hurley had always just figured he'd end up finding more, right? He stopped the bleeding as best he could and kept driving. It was getting kind of hard to see the road, but somehow he managed to drive into West Point. Maybe those soldiers wouldn't mind helping him out, he thought for a moment. But then he thought no. He could ask them for help and shelter and maybe be safe, but at what cost? They'd take his van, probably take his guns too, try to ship him off to some refugee camp or something. As Hurley drove through the biter-infested town, he knew that even though he might be dying, he'd rather die like this than submit back to that old life, that old way of being looked down upon. Hurley almost oversteered into a building a couple of times, but soon he was on a straight shot, absolutely rocketing his way out of town, until, suddenly, the engine made a noise. A wheel slipped, and Hurley crashed the van into a light pole. This time, there was no convenient car nearby, no gun shop full of bullets, just a dying man inside of a van, coughing and bleeding and trying to get the engine to start. Hurley gave up trying. He sat there for a minute before his coughing attracted some biters. He thought that it didn't really matter what happened to him now. It had all been worth it. He had finally lived. He was out of bullets, though, and, well, it still hurt when the biters bit him. But Hurley didn't stay standing too much longer anyhow.